Okay, I present to you today full, unhinged lunacy or terrible people. You can decide which it is. I'm not going to tell you which it is. And this story comes to us from Newfoundland, Pennsylvania. I guess to push back against what some churchgoers saw as an unfair attack on assault weapons as a result of the mass shootings where such weapons were used, worshipers in a church held a ceremony where they wore what looked like dollar store tiaras, as well as strange sort of cloaks or gowns, and clutched AR-15 rifles, almost like you would hold a baby, and drank holy wine and said vows to the AR-15 rifles. This is basically the closest you can come to marrying a weapon, okay? And the entire thing led to a nearby school shutting down classes for the day. Dozens of AR-15 rifles were brought into the church. The religious connection was they said it symbolizes the rod of iron from the Christian book of Revelation. And the pastor who leads this church is Sean Moon. And if the name Moon rings a bell for you, he happens to be the son of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, now deceased, who was a self-proclaimed Messiah and founded that cult known as the Unification Church. They make this very, very real all of a sudden. I've been talking about Second Amendment fetishists for years. What is more fetishization of weapons than saying a vow to your AR-15 rifle in a church service while clutching it like you would a newborn baby? They are doing the equivalent of pronouncing a lifelong commitment similar to a marriage vow to a gun, and it's indistinguishable from ISIS. It's a different flavor, but this is the Tally Born Again or the Tally Baptists. Call it whatever you want. Now, when you look at the details, as if you need to, it actually gets even more ridiculous, because when they got to church with their AR-15s, an attendant would check each weapon at the door to make sure it was unloaded and that it was secured with a zip tie, which would prevent it from discharging. How does that make sense, right? Guns are great. Gun-free zones are terrible. This is so important to me that I'm doing the equivalent of marrying it through a vow, but we actually don't really trust the worshipers with the guns, so please check your bullets at the door. Like, every aspect of this is a self-parody.
Good thing that they had those zip ties, though, especially because that whole crowd is drinking wine.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have a group of armed people who are also intoxicated. I don't want to see that.
And of course, the wine that they were drinking is the blood of Christ, obviously. And it's like, I know that that's a common thing, but in the end, is that any more normal than marrying a gun?
Literal body of Christ.
It's a different,
or blood of Christ.
It's a different. Oh yeah, and the wafers are the body of Christ. That's a different story. Probably not what we're talking about today. But what we're talking about today is that this is what we're fighting against, right? I've talked about how if we don't have some shared set of values that can serve as a jumping off point to resolve our political differences, it's very difficult to have a productive conversation about policy, right? How do you start a conversation about gun safety with someone who dresses up to go to church and does the closest thing you can do to marrying a gun, right? And that's why I don't actually think you can talk to these people. These are individuals that need to be marginalized in the political system. They need to be made irrelevant through voter turnout, because how do you start a conversation with someone like this? What sort of shared value can you have with someone who says, what I need to do as a response to the school violence and the mass shootings and the political discussion about guns is to bring my rifle to church, dress up with a dollar store crown and a pink and white smock, white gloves, and basically marry my rifle, right? Where can we start? Like, I just wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know where to start. And that's why I don't think we really can talk to these people, and that voter turnout is the way to marginalize these views to the extent that it's even possible. And, this church is in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a relatively purple state, which can go one way or the other. And this is what we're fighting against. It's bad.